Hello, everyone, and welcome to Meticulous Talks on August 28th. I am Cursor Chords,
And I'm Hithroc.
and this week we have something special to bring to you all. I forgot. Give me 1 second.
Did you forget what we're reviewing?
Yeah, no. Well, yes. It's a couple of weeks ago. Actually, it was really more like a month ago. We were contacted by the developers of the new collectible card game Pony Wars, asked to give a review. And so Hithroc and I have spent the last couple of weeks reading over things, looking over the rules, playing a few test games, and we're ready to do that. Ready to tell you what we think about it.
Yeah.
So just as a quick intro, Pony Wars is a new CCG developed by Stephen Beeson, perhaps best known to the community by the name Drata Arcana, with production support from Andrew Heilborn. I asked him about this earlier. I'm pretty sure that's how he wants it pronounced. Apologies again. We've got the sort of a board layout here, not exactly the way that it would be for someone looking at it. We're going to start by giving you just a little basic run through of how the game works, not a real like a how to play detail thing, just enough so you understand the concepts that we're going to be talking about later. And then we'll go to what's good and what's not so good. Oh, there you go, Hithroc. Thank you.
Yeah, I thought that might be helpful.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I see you're already doing that. Oh, no, it was me.
No. Yeah. You are the one who knows the TTS tools here.
Yeah.
So, let's clear things away here quickly so that clear. So, for your layout of the game, you've got your deck and your discard pile down in the bottom right. Bottom left, bottom center, there's your hero card. Oh, sorry.
Hold on. So we actually can't see your cursor on the screen.
Oh,
so
I
maybe
see.
you should enable that.
That's an OBS thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
That.
Should be show cursor. Yeah. Yeah. In the bottom right corner here, we have the player's deck and their discard pile. Left to it, we have a hero card. If you're familiar with MLP CCG, which you probably are, given our audience, hero card is kind of like a main character, although they're like more nuanced to that. I think hero cards are a little bit more important than mains in MLP CCG, I would even say. And to the left of the hero, we have artifact. You can control only one artifact at a time, and they usually have pretty powerful abilities. Are you good with cursor now?
I don't know. I don't think so.
No.
Like I see hide cursor over projectors. That's not it. I don't think.
Oh, maybe it's not. Maybe it's because you're doing a game capture. Well, I guess.
Maybe.
I guess I will point to things as you talk about them.
Okay. Sorry about that, everyone. So yeah, you mentioned you were going on the heroes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, I didn't pay attention at all to what you had said.
Yeah, I just said that heroes are like main characters in LPCCG, but they're a little bit different because they dictate more things. Like in LPCG, mains usually just have text and their power, but here it's way more nuanced than that. They have magic. They have like how much resources you gain per turn is depends on the hero, how many cards in hand you can have, and how many cards you draw at the start of the turn is also determined by the hero. So hero is a pretty important card in this game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. There are, I think, 6 of them, if I'm recalling correctly.
Yes,
Yeah.
there are 6 of them and 2 secret ones.
Correct. Yes. Right beside that, there you got an artifact. Artifacts are kind of like resources, I guess, in the MLP sense. You can have one of them
Yeah.
in play at a time, and they give you some sort of global benefit to all of your units that are in play.
Yeah.
Just sorry,
Yeah, but you could only have one.
correct. Yeah. Right up above that, in the sort of top left quadrant, you got 2 rows of stuff. So on the bottom are your location cards. These are kind of like what would I say? I mean, they're kind of like resources too, I guess, in a way. Usually, they have some benefit to their defense. The way the game plays is that you have your units on the front line that are kind of fighting the other guy's units, and you're trying to destroy the opponent's locations. And whoever destroys all their opponent's locations first wins. And
Yeah.
so each location has a defense score up in the top right, as well as a cost up in the top left that you pay each turn that it stays in play.
Yeah. So basically, locations are kind of resources. They have abilities. They're also kind of like a safe zone for your units. It's really hard to kill your units while they're at a location for the reasons we'll get further. And they're also kind of your life resource. The win condition of this game is when you destroy all of the opponent's locations, you win the game, and you start with 3 of them. Here we have 2 because this represents like a board state in the middle of the game where like one of the locations was already destroyed. You start with 3.
Oh, I see.
Once all of
That's
them
why
are
you had
destroyed,
that over there.
yes.
I see. Yeah. Sorry.
And this too, I had like some cards at a location. So yeah, once all of them are destroyed, you lose the game.
Yep. And then right up on top of that is your frontline space, which I guess analogous to there's a zone in Magic for that, like the battle zone or whatever, where the active units are. And the
Battlefield.
battlefield, correct? Thank you. And yeah, so the units that go there are your active units. Each one of them has a might score, which is its sort of offensive number, and a defensive score, as well as a cost up in the top left. And they have abilities and they have keywords on them, much like you'd expect from friends slash creatures slash whatever in any card game.
Yeah. Normally, you could only have 3 frontline units, but once one of the locations is destroyed, you gain an extra one. So if you have 2 locations, you get 4 frontline spaces, and if you have 2 locations destroyed, you get 5 frontline spaces. So that's kind of a catch-up mechanic, I would say. The more locations you lost, the more frontline units you could have.
Exactly. And you'll notice just by looking at these that they come in a variety. There's some relatively weaker, cheaper ones, and then the expensive ones will have commensurately more power in them. Over on the right there, we have an epic, which is a kind of a deck building restriction that we'll get to later.
Yeah.
And then finally, there is the top right quadrant of the board, which is the court. That's something that doesn't really have an analog, I don't think, in most other CCGs that I've played.
Yeah.
The court is so cards can get into the court either when they get revealed or clashes, and we'll get to what exactly clashes are later, or when you sort of pass on one of your turns, you can put a card into the court. You don't have to pay to get cards in there, and some cards have abilities that can be used from there, but I think I put it to you during testing, Hithroc, the court is kind of like playing cards without actually paying their costs, or kind of like half playing the cards.
Yes. So the main idea of the court, at least the way I see it, it's kind of like your second hand, because cards that you have in the court, they come from your hand for free, so you kind of like transfer them there through a variety of ways, like clashes or by passing a turn. And In addition, so cards in your hand usually don't do anything, but cards in court can do stuff, and they have abilities that are only. So some abilities only work while the card is in court. Some abilities work while the card is in play or is in court, and most of the court abilities are only one-time use. So, for example, if a card has a multiple-time use in play, it would have the same ability, but if it was in court, you need to sacrifice that card. So it's a one-time effect, kind of. And in addition to that, you can play cards from the court like you normally would from your hand. So you can like just pay the cost and play the card.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah. Okay. And I guess like I kind of already mentioned, down the bottom right, draw pile, discard pile, and there is a vanished or completely out of play zone that's not being shown as well. There
From the
are
game.
several cards that can take stuff all the way out and not just to the graveyard.
Yeah. Another thing about court that I forgot to mention is that unless a card is a courtier, which is a special keyword, at the end of the turn, all of the cards in court are discarded. So it's while it is an extra hand, cards there don't stick around for too long unless they're special.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I guess last thing just to note is that this TTS mod that you're seeing this game in, for what it's worth, this is what we use to do our test matches. It is private, not available for public use at the moment, at least. Just so that's clear. Otherwise, excuse me. Does that cover? Oh, sorry. I think we're good on the run through. There. Oh, sorry. Should mention, yes, spells, which are a pretty important card type here. We've got one in the discard pile. So spells are all these cards with the. I want to say blue, but I'm colorblind. Is that purple?
It's purple.
It's purple. Okay. Purple border. Nearly all of them, like there's no cost in terms of sort of cost like the units have up in their top left to play them, but almost all of them require you to exhaust your hero. And since there are very few ways to ready the hero, except for at the start of the main phase or the resupply phase, actually, it's generally a once per turn kind of thing.
Yeah, and turns in this game are really important. There aren't many of them.
Mm-hmm. So, similar to your hero abilities, which generally also exhaust the hero, spells are usually really powerful, and timing when you play them is a pretty important part of the strategy.
Yeah.
Okay. I think that covers all the. I mean, there's a few game concepts we haven't get to yet. We'll get to them when we go through other stuff.
Yeah, I think we should explain clashes at least.
Sure. Okay. So
and attacks.
Right. Okay. So one of the things that you can do on your turn is you can initiate an attack. There's two kinds of attacks. There's either a melee attack, which is what'll happen most of the time, where you basically swing one of your units at an opposing unit. You don't have to.
Frontline unit.
Correct. Thank you. An opposing frontline unit. You don't have to exhaust or tap your unit to do it. It just happens. And the other type is a ranged attack, which only certain cards can do. It'll say on the card if it's able to make a ranged attack or not. But yeah, in both cases, the attack will initiate a clash. And so what that happens is, starting with the player who initiated the attack, you reveal a card from your hand, and its cost gets added to your attack power, similar to the way face-offs work in MLP. The card that's revealed goes to your court, and then the defending player gets a chance to do the same thing.
Yeah, and whoever has the highest number in the end with all of the additions from clash cards that we should put into court wins the fight. And the winner usually doesn't lose anything, and the loser uses their unit. So that's one of the primary ways of getting rid of units, other than card dismissal or removal.
Generally, yes.
Yeah.
And then the other time that a clash happens is once the main phase is done, both players have passed their turns. Then we go to the Conquest Phase, where each player targets an opposing location, and then everybody adds up their total might on the front line, plus the defense power of the location that the opponent targeted. We compare those. Again, each player gets to submit a clash card, which gets added to their power. Whoever wins that destroys the opposing location, and we move on to a new turn.
Yeah. And this is why turns are you won't get a lot of turns in this game, because there are only 6 locations. And once you destroy, at most you can destroy 5 locations until some player wins the game. And at the end of every conquest phase, which is what just Cursor described, at least one location will be guaranteed destroyed. So in this game, you get 5 turns at most. And this is why exhausting the hero is such an important resource, because you can only exhaust your hero once per turn. So you get to do that 5 times at most. Not considering some cards that unexhaust your hero, which are there, but they're very rare.
Mm-hmm.
There's only 2 of them, I think.
Yeah, something like that.
So yes, this is why turn structure, not turn structure, but amount of turns is important. And most of the game actually happens not from turn to turn, but within a turn. In the game works like this: one player does one action, then the priority goes to the other player, and that other player does one action, and so on. Players just go back and forth, back and forth.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So there's a real sort of strategy in you might have gone into a turn with a certain plan that you're trying to execute, but then each turn you're looking at what your opponent's doing, and maybe it's more important for you to try to react to them versus pursuing your objective or whatever. And
Yeah.
the other thing that's interesting is that at any time either player can pass, and when you pass, you will either gain a standing, which is the sort of mana quotes that you use to pay for costs. You can pay a standing to draw a card, or you can put a card from your hand into the court. So passing is a way to gain resources, but if you pass, you're giving the opponent, who also has the choice whether they want to pass, you're giving them the power to say, okay, main phase is over because I'm also passing.
When both players pass consecutively, the conquest thing starts, and after it, the turn ends.
Yeah. So figuring out when you want to pass, and perhaps passing to the degree possible, is also an interesting tactical decision and strategic decision that the game has.
Yes. So should we go to my part now?
Sure. Alrighty.
Okay. So my part of my TED talk is new player experience. And I'll begin talking about new player experience starting from the website. On the website, you can buy this game for $20 for a single pack, and there's no description of what it is other than a screenshot, which tells a little bit about lore, I think. Yeah, on the back there. And in the name it says CCG randomized deck, but in the actual item where you have this drop down menu, it says single pack. And if you click on that arrow there, you'll get either free packs or a single pack or a booster box. The size of the box is also unknown, so I don't know how many packs are there in the booster box. So I actually was very confused by this. I had to clarify what's in it. Is it a deck or is it a pack? So it turns out it is a deck. It has 49 cards, I think we counted, something like that.
Yes, I believe that's correct.
In it, and it will have one hero card. It will have some fixed cards, and basically it will be like a full deck that you can play. So for $20, you're getting the full deck. But I certainly didn't get that from the website. I had to actually go and ask, which is if I didn't know about this game at all, and someone I know linked it to me, I would get no idea what this is about. Okay, away from the website into the rules. So there are a lot of nitpicking I can do about the rules, like table of contents not actually aligning with actual contents, but I will actually skim through that. There's a lot of things like that. Let's start with introduction and overview in the rules. We only no.
Oh, sorry. Okay, you handle it. Okay.
Yeah,
This is Hithroc's in the driver's seat here.
Yeah. In introduction overview, we only get 2 sentences about the game, which tell me nothing about the game other than it is a CCG. If I never played CCGs before, I don't even know what that means. It'll be nice to have like a more thorough introduction, like what the game is about, how does it play, what's the main goals are, what win condition is. We actually don't get the win condition in the rules until like very, very late. Like I think it's here in the turn structure where a player with no location loses the game at the very end of this page, which is very weird. Usually games at least somewhat describe like, oh, the win condition is blah, 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 blah. Not here. Then the game goes into board layout, and the board layout is actually pretty clear. I think the board layout is all right, so I will not stop on it. After board layout, we get deck construction and card types. Overall, I think they do a good job at like showing you what cards look like, what certain parts of cards are. Obviously, we don't know what any of these words mean, like what is magic or what is standing, but that's fine for card types because maybe we can like refer to them later. So these are locations. Pages also mentioned that unlike all the other cards, hero and location cards don't have type on them. So I only know that this is a location because the card doesn't tell me that. But I think that's fine. So here we have our militia, which are units, but also like a little special unit so that you can start the game with. Then we have epics. Then we have artifacts. Then we have tactics. And then we have this thing. At first, here on this page, it says up to 3 of any cards, other cards. At first, I thought that that means, in addition to all the previous restrictions, I can include like 3 of any cards, and that's it. The deck is done. But apparently, that means that you can have as many cards as you want, but only up to 3 of the same one. So that part was confusing. And it is actually explained later in the rules, but it's 3 pages later. Like it took me 5 minutes to get to here because I tried to like deconfuse myself of what up to 3 cards means. And then after explaining your card types comes the most confusing part of the rulebook, I think, and that's phases of a turn. So far the player only knows the board layout and the card types, and we're jumping straight into how the game is played step by step. And the first sentence here is, gain standing equal to your charisma. Well, as someone who just read this document, I have no idea what standing is. I have no idea what charisma is. And most interesting part, charisma is not mentioned anywhere else in the document. It's the only mention of the word charisma in this document.
But we did find out that is like a holdover from an old version of the rules. Which
I was about to get into that. So charisma is actually this part of the rules here, standing per turn. I assume they called it charisma initially in some like iteration of the rules, but then got rid of it, but didn't get rid of it completely. But like, so one thing we wanted to mention is that what we're being given as a review here is the final product. We specifically asked, is this like a pre-production or is it the final product? And we were answered that it is the final product. So I'm reviewing it as such. And charisma, I have no idea what charisma is. And that's kind of present throughout this entire section here, phases of a turn. This section here is more fitting for like a comprehensive rules rather than introductory rules, which this rule book is. This book is supposed to be introductory. It's supposed to explain me how to play the game. But this one just lists how things happen in order. It doesn't explain me what any of these things are. If I continue reading through this section, it mentions a lot of terms which I, as a reader, have no idea what they mean until I get to glossary here. Like it mentions attacks, it mentions tactics. Well, I guess tactics are explained. It mentions garrisoned, orders. I have no idea what any of this means. Actually, when reading this rulebook for the first time, I had to actually stop reading this section and go into glossary, because I realized that continuing reading the phases of a turn section will not get me anywhere. I will not understand any of it. So I will actually stop going through the section. I think I gave a general gist that this section doesn't really explain anything, and jump straight into glossary. And I think glossary actually does a fairly good job of explaining things. Like actions are explained here. I guess they should have been explained in the phases of a turn, where like it says that you can use an action. Maybe that'll be like a better fitting place for it. But it is explained in the glossary. But at least the explanation of actions is fine. One thing I would mention is that probably instead of describing the icons, I would use the icons themselves. So I don't have to like think, oh, lightning bolt is that icon over there, and so on. The major problem with glossary and the rules in general here is that like the rules end here and the glossary doesn't even explain everything. For example, glossary here mentions magic at the end. If you will look at clash section at the very end, the clash value of a spell card is equal to your magic. Well, this is the only instance where the word magic is used in this entire book. And actually, no, there's two instances. We also get magic here in the hero section card. So far, I have no idea what magic is. And even if I read through the entire rule book, every single word, I still have no idea what the magic is. And since the book doesn't use any icons, this purple icon over here that hero uses is actually magic, but I have no idea that that means magic because the rule book doesn't explain that to me. And that is presented throughout the rulebook. Like magic is the worst offender here, where we have this entire mechanic of magic, which spells actually use heavily. And I think magic is actually a very important part of the game. Wouldn't you agree, Kirsten?
Yeah. I mean, as mentioned, spells are like usually going to be one of the more powerful effects in your deck, and understanding how they work is yeah. Virtually
paramount.
all decks are going to run them. So
yeah. So yeah, spells heavily used by magic, and magic heavily is used in spells and in hero cards, and it's not explained in the rule book at all. And that's like the worst offender I found in this rule book, that like magic is not explained at all. But there are a lot of like more little things as well, like it's not explained when the location is destroyed, what happens to all of the units inside of it, etc. So in general, my impression of the rulebook is it's supposed to be an introductory rulebook, but it doesn't explain how to actually play the game to a new player. I wouldn't even say very well. I would say at all. Like I and Cursed and Pages also reviewed it with us. We're CCG players. We know how usually things work. We already have like concepts worked out. And we were still confused by a lot of things, because a lot of things were either not explained at all or structured in a very confusing way. I can't even imagine what it would be to read this book for someone who is either maybe like not a hardcore board game player, but more like a casual who plays like every now and then, or someone who has never played CCGs or even board games before. I don't think it would be possible to even learn the game. You would need another player to explain everything to you. That was my general impression of the rulebook. So the rulebook is honestly probably the weakest part of this game. I think it needs to be completely rewritten in order for it to work, and it presents a very high barrier of entry, because in order to play the game, you need to learn it, and this book doesn't do a very good job of it. There's also more minor thing with cards themselves as well, as far as rules concerned, and that is the templating. So, for example, here we have actions represented by icons. So, for example, this little infinity symbol here means that you can use that action as many times as you want per turn. And exhaust symbol here means that you exhaust this card to use this action. Exhaust symbol is actually not explained in the rules at all as well. And then on the second card, we have a star, means you can activate it when this card is in play once per turn. And a court, like a little hammer thing, gavel, I think it's called, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so this means you can activate this thing in court as well. So we see the slash here, and we can kind of determine, like, all right, that means the card can either be used in play or in court. Makes sense. But when we move on to the next card here, it has Lightning Bolt, which is a trigger, and a gavel, and it has slash between them. And here, for some reason, the slash doesn't mean or, it means and. That means this card is a triggered effect, and it can only be used in court, which I was very confused by it. That slash in some cases means either, and in some cases it means and. Yeah, we actually had to clarify that as well. Another thing about templating is that here Slanderer has, if Slanderer is in your court, sacrifice them. But this ability can only be used in court, as far as we understood at least, because it's a triggered effect in court. So, like the templating about the court abilities, and like some of them say, like have if this card is in your court, do something. It's a little bit weird and confusing and needs clarification. The next thing here is the ephemeral keyword. Ephemeral keyword it's a keyword and it's a trait. The rulebook explains it in the glossary as a trait, but here we see it as a keyword. It used to mean the same thing. That's a weird templating issue. I'm not sure why these are not the same.
Okay, just to clear up, so Andrew in chat mentioned that reactions apparently can be in court or in play. I'll just make a note. The rule book, as it's written, explicitly says that if it's a reaction and it's court, then it's both of them. That it is a reaction used from the court. So I guess that is just another point to the rule book then.
Yeah. So the next thing is more inconsistencies about templating. So for example, we here have Scout and Leyline Ritual, which both mention collect word, which is actually explained in the rulebook, thankfully. But here it is boldened, and here it is not boldened. Like, what's the difference? Like, here it says collect a spell and it's not boldened, but here it says collect a tactic and it is boldened. So it's a little inconsistencies like that. Here, Stasis Mage actually has an actual text on the card in italics for some reason. It says you may choose not to ready a Stasis Mage at the start of the turn. When we actually had the test game with Cursed, I just ignored this text because I assumed it was a reminder text. But it is actually a gameplay relevant text here. I have no idea why it is in italics, but yeah. And last but not, I guess last and least, we have a little funny thing here. We have a discrepancy between Griffin and Griffon. Is it Griffin or is it Griffon? I don't know, but this card says Griffin in the trait. In the subtitle, it is Griffon, and this card says Griffon in the trait as well. Like, which one is it? So why did I walk through all of these cards to show like template issues? So the reason is that both the rulebook and the text card templating themselves, the rulebook I think needs a complete rework, but the templating needs a lot of polish, because there's a lot of like little issues like this where different things used for different stuff. For example, slash means like or, and sometimes it doesn't mean or sometimes it means and. Like, it's very confusing. There's like a little templating issues like collect. Another thing that Pages found is that some cards refer to like some cards are referred to as this card, but some cards are referred to as name. For example, on what's the card? Do I have an example here? Yes. For example, on the regulars here, we have card refers by itself by its name. Regulars don't count. Blah 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 blah. And we also have like when name of the card enters play and so on. But some of the cards refer to themselves as this as well. So yeah, templating needs a lot of polish, at least from my experience. So yeah, for new players, the barrier of entry in general is really, really big, I think, it will be really hard to learn the game without someone else to teach you, and that's a major weak point of this game. I think I'm done on that.
Okay. Hithroc was the guy that we kind of said to focus on the rulebook section, and so that was his his
Yeah,
point.
thanks for coming to my TED talk.
Exactly. So thank you very much for putting in the effort. For what it's worth, that was pretty much largely my experience with it as well. We
And
had
pages too.
we had a relatively lengthy list of questions and clarifications that we wanted to ask just from reading the rulebook the first time, and then first time we jump in to play a game, it was spawned another page-long list of questions to ask, basically about interactions in the rules and such. So that's definitely, like, we expect it would be the same for anyone kind of jumping in off the start.
Yeah. I guess one thing I want to add is, like, some people say, oh, it's like just like minor issues, they're easily fixed. Well, let me remind you that we were reviewing final product, which you paid at least $20 for. So I'm reviewing it as such.
Yeah, exactly. When you're talking about a something that's being sold for $20 a pop, there's a high standard that should be applied.
Yeah.
Okay, so with that, we will move on to our experiences with sort of the gameplay and with some deck building. Hithrock and I played a test match with randomized decks that we sort of followed the formula that we were given so that we would get the new player experience. But we also spent a game building sort of based on the card lists that were on the website. We built a couple of decks that I guess Hithrock built 2 and I built 1 just to kind of see if we could figure out how to make things synergize and how to work properly.
Yeah.
And I guess let's see. So the first thing that I can say is that, as we kind of mentioned earlier, uh, your hero abilities and and the spells tend to be kind of almost by far the most powerful abilities in the game. And that's why they're kind of gated behind the cost of having to exhaust your hero, and so you're, generally speaking, notwithstanding certain cards that allow you to get past that, limited to 5 of them per game. And so that's gonna form the core of your deck strategy, basically. Which hero ability you're gonna have, and then which spells you're gonna put into your deck to maximize that. And admittedly, it's a pretty nice strategic choice that on each given turn you're going to have to either probably play a spell or else use your hero ability, and so yeah, that's a good choice to have to make.
Yeah. The
One
only downside to it, I guess, is that you kind of have to have spells in your deck.
Fair enough.
Not necessarily, but somewhat.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. So one thing about the deck building that's very interesting is that your deck can be pretty much as small as you like. Like the lower limit is something like like 7 or 7 cards in the draw deck, I think.
No. It is 7 cards in game, like on the board, and 0 cards in the draw deck. That's the lowest you can get.
Correct. Yes. So and then for those of you used to semi-traditional CCGs where it's somewhere in the 30s and 40s range, yeah, that's a big difference. And so being able to build your deck as small as you want is certainly a very interesting decision. Even in the first game that we played, Hithrock, you brought, I don't know how many cards are in that deck.
20.
Yeah. No, I was talking about the other one.
Oh, the one. It was 6 because it's supposed to be 5. So I had 6 because I didn't understand one thing about the rules very clearly. But it was supposed to be 5 draw decks because that's how many cards I draw at the start of the game with my hero.
Right. So 12, I guess, technically. Yeah, it was, and 12 card combo deck that just won the game. Well, actually, you didn't actually win that game, but it was a had a very legitimate chance of just winning the game on the first turn.
Yeah.
And that's the kind of thing that is a little dangerous if you're going to allow players to build their deck as small as you want. If you've got cards in there that are going to combo, someone's just going to bring exactly that. They're going to be able to draw the whole thing on the first turn and could be game over real fast. Now, that's not necessarily a bad thing. You just kind of got to be careful about that when you're designing your sets.
Yeah.
And, ban lists exist for that same reason in every other CCG, but it's something that's worth pointing out.
But yeah, not even for combo decks, for like regular decks can still play with like very close to 100 consistency because you can build it as small as you want. But so yeah, that's something that developers need to be very careful about. It is, but like there's a reason in other games minimal card limits exist.
The other principal deck restriction that we didn't get to, well, I kind of mentioned it earlier, are epics. So you can only have one epic in your deck per 20 cards. Now that 20 cards counts your hero, your locations, your militia, as well as all the stuff that's in your draw deck, and the hero itself. So you could have a hero and
Epic itself.
sorry, my apologies. Epic itself. You'd have an epic plus 19 other cards. That would be a legal 20 card deck. So what that means is, so generally the epics are really, really good. They have really powerful effects. Looking at Shadow Feather here with, saying, clashes are always value 4. 4 is really good. The vast majority of cards in this game are not going to be able to have, are not going to have cost 4 for a clash. So this is a really good effect. And so the fact that your epics kind of gate, sorry, my apologies, excuse me. The fact that you have these sort of 20 card thresholds means that in general, your decks are going to go in intervals of 20 cards. Because that's how you unlock your sort of next epic for deck building. It is notable that sort of, in particular, I guess in sort of high level play, people might tweak their decks a little bit and realize that it's better to have, I don't know, a 35 or 34 or whatever for that extra consistency. So there's that, yeah. But the thing that is interesting is that your deck size is a kind of a resource too. If you expect the game to play out over 3 or 4 turns, you're drawing cards each turn. You really don't want to run out of cards before the game ends, unless you've got the ability.
You draw a lot of cards in every turn.
Yeah. So that is an interesting point to it.
Yeah, I think one of the first games we played I actually ran out of my deck before I could win. That's because we also kind of didn't play Exhaust right, but still, it is a point to consider in the deck building that how big of a size my deck should be, how fast I expect to win the game.
Mm-hmm. One thing that I had brought up to Hithroc, and he's not familiar. I don't know if anyone in the audience is. The game actually reminds me a lot of Gwent in that way. Gwent, the Witcher card game. In Gwent, it's a 3-round system, and there's a lot of and I guess this is kind of getting into gameplay, but a lot of that game is in knowing when you've won this particular battle or when you've lost, and okay, I should pass. I should save my resources for the next thing. There's a similar kind of thing here, in that you can't it's a bad idea to over invest to get one location, and now you don't have any resources left to go into the next ones. And it's good to look at the board and say, okay, I'm not going to win this one. I should just pass and save my resources for the next fight.
Yeah. Another thing about deck building is that unlike many other CCGs, not all of them, but many other CCGs, this game doesn't have color system. Like in Magic on MLP CCG, cards are usually colored, and certain card mechanics are gated behind the color. So in order, for example, in CCG, pink is the color of dismissal, and if you want a lot of dismissal in your deck, you would kind of have to go pink and have to work a little bit for that. This game doesn't have that, which is I think colors is like an interesting thing from the deck building perspective, but it doesn't necessarily mean that that it's bad that this game doesn't have it. So
Yeah, and, it's perfectly reasonable for the developers to kind of add something like that in later. But yeah, well, what that means is you're not particularly limited in the choices that you make when you choose your hero or whatever. Like, in MLP, you pick your main character and it's like, okay, now I'm in that color. These are the things that I have available to me. In this game, you pick your hero and pretty much the whole set is still available regardless of which hero you
yeah.
chose.
Bugle in the chat points out that good consistency might be an incredibly bad thing because eventually decks will play the same because they'll have such a good consistency. And yeah, like good consistency can end up being a really bad thing. But so far, like, I mean, we didn't play that many games to find like, oh, this deck wins every time, like plays the same every time, and like has very good chances of winning. So we can't really say how like bad or good it gets. So yeah.
Yep. Okay, I kind of moved us over already.
To gameplay.
Yeah. Quickly deal with the chat here. There we go. Alrighty. Yeah, move us over to gameplay. So I had already kind of mentioned that the details behind it. I think the pass mechanic is one of the coolest things about this game. It kind of like it's a decision that you have to make every turn. Like, okay, I know what I want to do, but can I get away with passing? And sometimes it's obvious. Like, okay, if I pass, Hithroc's just going to pass, and then he's going to stomp me in the Conquest Phase. So I can't do that. I have to play. But it was something that was always like in the back of my mind. Can I get away with passing? Can I get away with passing? And that's it's interesting to have that tactical decision every turn.
Yeah. As we've mentioned, passing means that your opponent can pass and go into Conquest Phase, which inevitably means one of us will lose a location.
Yeah. So I guess another thing, again, small sample size. We only played a couple games, but it was somewhat interesting that in all of our games, the first player to lose a location first always lost the whole thing.
Yeah.
Which is, yeah, I mean, that is to some extent expected. Guy got ahead first. It is like there are compensatory mechanics in the game in that when you lose a location, you gain an extra frontline space, and you also no longer have to pay the upkeep cost on that location. Top right number.
Yeah.
Sorry, top left number. So you're getting more standing per turn. But it's a relatively small amount of compensation, generally
Yeah.
speaking. The units that your opponent used to beat you in that conquest phase are still going to be out, and you still do have to deal with them.
Yeah, you're still in a losing position after you lost the conquest. Your opponent is ahead not only in destroying your location, but they're also ahead in units because they won that conquest phase.
Mhm.
Like they're ahead of you, and to like come back, you need to advance board quite a bit, which can be difficult.
Mhm.
In comparison, for like MLP CCG, there's like this kind of cleanup mechanic. Right after we do a face off, everybody moves home, and there's like actually two catch up mechanics here. After a face off, I have to deal with the home limit as initiator of the face off. Might have to deal with the home limit, right? And you don't. So that like we start like with kind of like a clean slate with both of the problems empty, and I have to deal with the home limit now, and you can deal with it later. So in LPCG, it's like more clear how catching up after losing a face off works, but in this game, there's nothing like that really.
Yeah,
Only extra frontline space and reduced upkeep.
yeah. Your best chance to catch up is presumably going to be getting big value off of your spell or hero power that you're getting
Yeah,
in the turn that comes afterwards. But your opponent also has their hero ready, and so well, in theory, is going to have something else to throw back at you as well.
Yeah. Again, our sample size is small. Maybe it's not necessarily a thing like in every game, but I think it is like snowballing is a little bit of a thing in this game for sure. Big also points out that in MLP CCG, if you went through the point threshold, your opponent also gets an extra AT. So yeah, there's like a lot of catch-ups for losing a face-off in MLP CCG.
Right, and it is worth pointing out actually that, like the points, or sorry, the AT in MLP, like that's in many. Well, let's see, that's like a 20% or even more than that sometimes lift in how much AT you're getting per turn.
Yeah.
Whereas in this game, losing a location is probably going to net you 1 or 2, or if it was a big one, 3 extra standing per turn, which is not that much, generally speaking, relative to the amount that you would gain normally.
Yeah, it's about 5%.
So has usually less of an impact.
Yeah.
The other thing I would point out is, I think we already mentioned it a little bit before, but the change in the turn structure, how it is back and forth, almost like everyone kind of taking a stream of mini turns rather than, I get one big turn to plan out, boom, 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 all the things I'm going to do, and then the opponent gets to react to it, is also a nice kind of change of pace from regular CCGs.
Yeah. So like you can only do one action before your opponent gets to do something. You can't chain things. There's like one spell card that lets you do that, but that doesn't count.
Yeah. I guess we haven't mentioned it yet, but the normal length of game is about 15 to 20 minutes. And depending on how things go, could be much shorter than that. Could be down to just 5 minutes. Sometimes can go longer, but I can see how, given that, as we mentioned, it's capped to 5 turns. At the end of 5 turns, somebody's going to win. So should be a nice, manageable thing to get into. A lot less risk of MLP thing, it run into 1 or 2 hours, and
Yeah.
yeah.
But personally, I don't like short games, so I like long games. But that's like it's different for everyone. That's a subjective opinion.
Yeah.
At this point.
Okay. Let's. I think that's it. Let's move on to our next category, which is art design and flavor. So we had some examples for this one as well.
That's the. We'll get to examples later.
Oh,
It's
okay.
just
Okay.
consistency design.
Okay. Apologies for everybody for spinning the perspective around. Hope no one got motion sickness. Radio. So, first thing that I can say is that in general, I thought the flavor was pretty good. There is a pretty cohesive tone across all the card designs in this first set. It's significantly dimmer than the usual MLP stuff, which, for what it's worth, game's not affiliated with My Little Pony in any way. It's its own thing. I wouldn't necessarily call it dark per se, but definitely kind of gritty. And this is a game about war after all. And I think that was that's gotten across pretty well in all the card design. There's nothing that really diverges from that, so that's good.
Yeah. Another thing to say is that the flavoring of the card, not as in the not from the lore perspective, but from card mechanics perspective, is done fairly well. A lot of cards have mechanics as you would expect for a card to have. So, for example, I actually forgot to bring this example, so I'll get it real quick. There it is. Did I bring it to the right place?
I mean,
so for example, Scapegoat is if you would lose standing due to an opposing effect, you may sacrifice Scapegoat instead. Like I think this is a well flavored card. Like I think the name is pretty clever for what it does.
yeah.
And there are a lot of cards like that. So I think flavoring for mechanics is done fairly well in this game.
Mm-hmm. On the subject of art, it is, and I guess we get a fairly representative look at them here. If you are, sorry, this was the example section, or?
No.
Oh, okay. I
Just continue thought.
heard you flipping those cards. Yeah, if you're coming from I suppose a quote unquote big name CCG like Magic or MLP or etc., you may find the art perhaps just a little bit underwhelming. You can see it's usually character against a flat or perhaps gradient background, maybe a little bit of stuff in there. That's not a gigantic issue. We understand this is a small independent effort. Budgets are limited. That you're not going to get fancy shiny foils or stuff like that. But it's worth pointing out.
Yeah, now we can go to
Okay.
example of some things.
All right. Spin again, everybody.
Yeah. So, and on that subject, like we know that the budget was probably limited, but sometimes you see somewhat like I'm not sure if blatant is the right word, but like these two characters are just like it's exactly the same copy pasted art, right? With just different colors and I guess like main designs. So it's it's like your character here is what I called it, and yeah, I mean with like limited budget, it's understandable, but it is also like I don't know anything about the budget when I buy the game. I just buy the game. Another thing is to the left here. If we like look at the general designs of cards, you can see like a lot of discrepancy between detailing. So, for example, Outpost Garrison here on the left is like it's almost a photograph with like effects applied to it. Maybe it is, I don't know. But like to the left of it, we have Luminous Tower, which is like a vastly different style. It's much less detailed and more like bright. I don't know. And it is seen throughout like a lot of cards here, where some cards are like very detailed and their backgrounds are like fairly detailed, but some cards have like very simplistic things. So there's like inconsistencies like that. And another thing, a little thing we noticed on Outpost Garrison, in the very corner here, you can see actually the dotted line from the editor, the art editor, I would presume, which was fun to find, but shouldn't be in the final game. That's for sure.
Yeah. It just kind of goes back to what we said earlier about polish and etc.
Yeah.
As a final point, however, it is worth mentioning that in terms of like the game details, the mechanical information on the cards, that's all generally pretty good. The numbers are big and clear. The font choices are relatively straightforward. There isn't really any issues in terms of contrasts or dark text against dark backgrounds. There isn't really any issues in terms of reading the cards and understanding what's on them, notwithstanding what we said earlier about the italics occasionally.
Yeah, so the italics was like the mechanical templating, but here we're talking about visual templating.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, in general, I was pleased with visual design of templates. I think the cards are easy to read. It's easy to distinguish between different cards, and I mean, you should talk about like as a colorblind person, which I learned just today. Was it easy for you to distinguish between card types?
Yes, absolutely. There's no real issues in terms of the shading. Like, yeah, there aren't any colors that are too close together. And the cards in general, the card types are like they're distinguished in ways other than color in terms of the way that they're. Well, I guess actually, no, yeah, they're all different enough that it's not a problem for me.
Okay.
All right, spin us around once more. Okay, so that brings us down to the subjective, personal opinions. And you're on the list here first, Hithroc.
Yeah. Well, first thing on this list is card templating, but we just talked about it, I suppose. So yeah, I was pleased with the card templating. I actually like how cards look. I think it's done well. Mechanically, I think the game flows pretty well. there are meaningful choices to make during your turn. I had to think about some of my turns, maybe not for 10 and 20 minutes like I sometimes do in MLP CCG, but there's it's not a the game requires thought to play, and there is a learning curve to it. You can't just there are I knew I made some mistakes during some of the games, which is good. That means I have had learning opportunities and stuff like that. So yeah, that was pretty good. Another thing that I specifically wanted us to do is to generate random decks, as if we bought them, because when you buy a deck from the store, you get a randomized deck with some fixed cards in it. And I wanted to see what the experience of playing that looked like, and it actually was pretty good. The deck played well. Also required me some thought to play it. It was interesting. I enjoyed the game we did with random decks.
Yeah. As for me, I kind of already mentioned. I think passing is a super cool mechanic. It's something that sort of, as far as I understand, is I kind of mentioned Gwent. It works a little differently in Gwent, though. The way that it works in this game is pretty novel. I as I kind of looked through the card list before we played our first game, I noticed there were some interesting cards in there. As I was going through it, there were a number of them that leapt out to me. It's oh, that kind of looks interesting. I wonder if I could build a deck around that, and that's good. That shows that the card design is kind of interesting and novel enough that some Johnny mind like me can latch on to some ideas.
Yeah, I saw the spell and I thought oh, I want to build a combo deck with this.
Yeah. Yeah, Hithroc's combo deck with that spell is well, I mean, that was the combo deck that we saw. It's
But yeah, sorry for interrupting.
Yeah, and similar to Hithroc, I thought playing through the game, especially with that randomized decks, one that kind of really forced me to grapple with the mechanics kind of as they were presented to me. It struck me that there's definitely some strategic depth here. There is definitely a learning curve, and if that's the kind of thing that appeals to you, that you want a game that you kind of are going to have to get dug into and really think your way through and figure out how the resource management works and how the economy works, then there's enough strategic depth here to probably get into that. Notably, we only played 2 games. It's possible that we just kind of scratched at the surface and there actually isn't all that much down there beneath it, but it seemed to me that there probably was enough.
Yep.
Alrighty. So that brings us into our final category, and that is, you are going to invest, well, for a single player, you're going to invest $20 to buy a randomized deck. If you want to play it with anybody, someone else is going to have to buy it. Is it worth it? And so the thing about it, the first thing to mention is that I think all of us here as MLP players can perhaps sympathize that if you invest in a CCG and you don't have anybody to play it with, that's a problem. It's not worth a whole bunch to you if you don't have anyone to play it with. And so this being a relatively small game that is somewhat lacking in community is kind of a strike against it. And I understand how you hear that and it kind of sounds like a catch-22, right? If you're not supposed to buy the game because there's no community, well, how can there be a community if nobody buys the game, right? And that kind of is kind of the issue with CCGs. It is something that needs to be worked on and solved by the developers. You can solve that by sort of generating hype and buzz and doing the marketing, which, to be fair, pretty sure that's kind of what they were trying to go for with exercises like this review. Games like MLP had kind of the internal catch-it of, people who are fans of My Little Pony. Oh, these are the characters I can play with. That's a good reason to buy the game. And so, that's something that is going to have to improve to increase the value proposition on this.
Yeah. The main thing is that it's not clear how the community will be. So for me, at least, it's not clear how the community will grow. In MLP CCG, the draw was from the IP. It was characters that are already familiar to people, and people wanted to play with them. I started playing the game because I wanted to play Trixie. This game doesn't have Trixie, so no Trixie out of 10. So it has like completely its own universe with its own characters, and like it's pony only really like in the name, so it kind of has to like develop its own depth into the lore or something. I don't know, for people to be interested in it. Uh, what I was saying, sorry. Yeah, so and that's the thing. Like I don't like it's not clear to me how the community will grow, but if it will grow, things will be better. But for now, because the community is small, um, there's also like a high upfront cost to the game in order to play it, and in order to get maybe the cards you want, you need to like buy at least several decks, which is adds up real quick.
Hmm.
Like if you are just two people who want to play the game, that's $40, and it's $40 for a randomized deck. What if I want to like build a specific deck? Well, I need to buy like maybe a box or even more, which is can be quite a bit of a barrier,
Hmm.
especially since second market is not a thing. And second market is only a thing if community is a thing. So yeah, like a lot of things tie into the community here.
Yeah, that is generally speaking one of the factors that mitigates the upfront cost of a CCG. Is, oh well, you buy a box or two, or sorry, a deck or two, or a couple of packs. Okay, if you get something that you didn't want, well, trade it to your friends. See if you can get something that goes into the deck that you want. And again, all kind of comes back to if you're the only person around who's playing this small community, you don't have that, and so you're going to be spending a lot more of your own money up front to get the cards you want.
Yeah. Another point is that we've only played a couple of games, and we're not sure how much of the deck building depth is there. Like how many archetypes might be there in the game, or how many decks you can like interesting different from each other decks you can build. So the replayability is not clear, but it also has been like one set. So maybe like this can be definitely addressed with like release of future sets.
Hmm. I think that kind of covers everything.
Yeah. Another thing that we kind of mentioned, at least I wanted to mention here, that um, because of this like upfront costs and need for the community for a CCG to really work, maybe this game would be better as a living card game rather than collectible card game. Yes, you would lose the like collectible part of a collectible card game, but I don't think that's such a big loss, and it's much easier to jumpstart as a living card game rather than collectible one.
Yeah, living card games, for those unaware with the term, it would basically mean that you pay an upfront cost and get the entire set, all 100.
It's 100 cards, yes, and 99,
100
and two
cards
secret ones.
and two secret ones, yes. Um, and so you lose that collectible, you lose that trading nature of it, but it is kind of, by merit of its existence, much easier to kind of jumpstart and much easier to get people into it because it's a fixed upfront cost. You look at the cards, you say, "Oh, those look cool." However much you would charge for it, they
Yeah,
know right away. Okay, I'm gonna buy the whole thing, and then maybe I'm gonna buy the whole thing for my brother as well, and we're gonna be able to play the game or whatever.
yeah.
Um,
You can think like in MLP CCG we actually have like a living set, so to say. Celestial Solstice is like a set, it's not randomized, right? You fight and you get every card from it. That's how collectible card games work, but on like major level.
mhm. Alrighty. Okay, yeah, that was the last major thing that we wanted to mention. So let's come into the end. Um, I think the conclusion that we want to bring out of this is that the game does have some pretty fundamentally interesting stuff to it. Both you and I had fun with the games that we played.
Yeah, I
Um,
would agree.
you probably had your most fun while you were comboing off, and that was maybe my least fun. But especially in the new player game, and as our decks were working, yeah, there was interesting decisions to make. There was interesting gameplay. It is fundamentally fun, and it's got some interesting game design to it. However,
Yeah,
it does have some pretty big issues with it at the moment that make it difficult to recommend. And the well, Hithrock, you were the one who spent the first part of the stream talking about the rules. You can summarize that again, I think.
Yeah, so the major issues that we found is that first is the high barrier of entry for two reasons. One is cost of the game, which we just discussed, right? That it's pretty high for a game without any community so far, or small community. And the second part is the rules, which don't explain the game at all. Well, they do kind of explain it, but it's pretty hard to get into this game. So not only the community is small, the intake, like, is it called intake, like, of new players, it's hard to imagine with a rule book like that. It's not like nobody will just read the rule book and understand how the game plays. Like, the barrier of entry is very high. And again, we're like experienced players already. It's we're still confused.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. It was the same experience that I had and Pages had as well. That as well as just kind of the general polish of rules, cards, whole nine yards. I mean, that all kind of comes together. Each of those things that we mentioned, spelling, templating, yada yada, it seems little, but when you're looking through the card list, you see details like that, and it kind of adds up in your mind.
Yeah, and it's not just like, it's not one small thing. One small thing. It's a lot of small things.
Mm-hmm. But these are all addressable issues. The devs were here in the chat, I think, and I believe I saw them sort of react to those kind of things. So if those things do get fixed in the future, I think this game could very well be worth taking a second look at, because there is,
Yeah.
as mentioned, there is some good game design here that could make for a fun game.
Yeah.
If you're interested, the website is ponywarsccg.com. Yes.
Yeah.
And a randomized deck sells for $20 US. I believe they ship. I don't think we mentioned that they ship anywhere in the US for sure. I don't know if they ship internationally.
Yeah. Also, I think we didn't mention the TTS mod that we have here. It's not, as far as we're aware, public, and we don't know if it's going to be public or not. But actually, I think the card list is public, so you can kind of make your own mod if you want to.
Yeah, exactly. And Drada just confirming in the chat that yes, they do ship anywhere in the world. So consider that. Otherwise, I believe that concludes the review.
Yeah.
Right, and we do appreciate the Pony Wars developers giving us this opportunity to have a look. Hopefully, the audience, you've found this illuminating. As far as we go, we'll be back 2 weeks from now with, I guess, more regular Pony Cards content. I believe we'll be back to talking about Fond Memories.
Yes, on 4th? No, on 11th.
It
Right?
would be, yes, the 11th of September will be our next. I suppose the other housekeeping note to make, if you've seen Reddit lately, and I believe I posted in Discord as well, we are putting on our Invitational Tournament again this year. Very pleased and proud to be able to do that. We have 8 wonderful players who are going to be participating in our sort of hybrid tournament this year, Core and Adventure. If you're not familiar with the Adventure format, it is Equestrian Odysseys onward, basically. And it's honestly it's a cool format. There's a lot of interesting decks to see, and
It has Trixie in it.
It has much Trixie in it, as far as I'm aware.
An entire set of Trixie. Links to find the game online. Hold on, I'll post the link to the official website.
Okay. But yeah, so the deck submission deadline for the tournament is September 17th. And then the streams will be starting on September 25th, and going every week from there, except for the weekend of October 22nd, because that's Ponyville Cider Fest, and there's going to be official streams, presumably, covering that.
Yeah.
Otherwise, this particular stream, as well as all of our past content, is going to get posted to YouTube. There it is right there. So feel free to check it out there. I think this one will probably go on a separate playlist. I don't know if we're going to do any more reviews like this in the future, honestly. Hithroc and I will discuss that, I guess.
Yeah. It was a lot of work compared to our regular content.
That is definitely true, yes. But, well, in the end, I think it was fun and hopefully informative. Otherwise, I guess that brings us to the end of our stream this week.
I think it does.
Alrighty. So yeah, as mentioned, September 11th will be our next one. Until then, I have been Cursor Chords.
That have been Hithroc.
And we'll see you then.
Bye.